He's doing what all of us need to do. Sinai, Hecharim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, Sinai, Hecharim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei, Shamayim V'aretz, Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei, Shamayim V'aretz. I lift my eyes up to the heavens, and what is the source of my help? My help will come from Adonai, the maker of heaven and earth. There's a story from Jewish tradition, a midrash, a folk tale, wisdom legend, of a fox who found a garden filled with ripe and lush and sweet fruits. The garden was fenced off on all sides. There was no way in. And the fox loved the garden and wanted nothing else but to eat of its grapes and taste its sweet fruits. And so the fox walked around the fence of the garden all the way around looking for a way in. And there in one spot, found a hole in the fence. But it was a small hole, and the fox was large. And there was no way that the fox could fit through that hole, but the fox knew that if it fasted for 3 days, for 7 days, it would be skinny enough and it would fit through. And so that's what the fox did. It fasted and denied itself everything that was pleasurable on this side of the fence until the fox became lean and frail and could fit through the hole. And inside the garden, the fox ate his fill and then some. He became fat again and he was happy. But he couldn't stay in the garden forever. So when he wished to go out again, to leave the garden, because he needed to, again he fasted for another 3 days, this time denying himself all of the lush fruit that was all around him. It was even harder. Lean and frail as he was, as he had been when he had entered, he squeezed himself back through that hole in the fence and left the garden. And when he was outside, he turned around and looked back at that garden wall. And gazing at the garden, he said, O garden, how good are you, and the fruits inside. All that is inside is beautiful and commendable. But what enjoyment has one from you? As one enters, so one comes out. Our rabbis teach such it is as this in this world as well. Our entry and our exit, they are nearly identical, unavoidable so. What matters, though, is our time in the garden. For sure how long we are inside its walls, but also, maybe more importantly, how we fill our days, no matter their number, how we nourish our souls with the sweet fruits within the garden walls. Matt loved the garden. He loved his time in it. He tasted of its finest and sweetest fruits. He shared them with his friends and his loved ones, and he helped them, all of you, all of us, to find the sweetness, the joy, and the laughter that lay inside the walls. Matt's life's work was planning and planting and preparing the garden for his family, particularly for Claire, Zoe, and Olin. He dedicated his professional life to seeking justice for the oppressed and the forgotten inside the garden. The little guy who couldn't get a break, or as Claire put it, couldn't stand up and fight the man. Matt stood up. He fought for those who needed a voice and spoke truth to power. He got them to listen. The garden was a more just, more compassionate, more equitable place because of Matt Good. It was more like God intended it to be, because Matt made it so. When Matt learned that he'd have to leave sooner than he ever wanted, he spent every moment of those excruciating last months preparing his family and all of us for his unavoidable and unbearably sad exit. Matt went on medical leave the very day that he got his diagnosis. He loved his job, but he loved his family and all of you more. His priority was clear. It was you, Zoe, it was you, Olin, and Claire, and all of you. Matt was a planner, a straight talker, a get-right-to-the-point, no-nonsense kind of guy. Zoe, you're like that too. You're like your dad in so many wonderful ways. Do you remember the questions that you asked your dad to make sure that I would answer when I came to the house for a visit months ago? I do. I wrote them down. Because the questions that you asked then, Zoe, are the questions that everyone in this room is asking right now. That's how smart you are, just like your dad. You wanted to know, is God real? And if not, why do we say prayers? Why does God let people have cancer? And can God just stop cancer? You wanted to know if we could ask God for whatever we wanted and it will just appear. Your dad liked the idea that to be Jewish means that it's not only okay, but a mitzvah, a commandment, to struggle and to question and to argue with God, even to be upset with God. We can begin to understand why your dad wanted to be Jewish, just like you and your mom and your brother, because struggling with God is about trying to get to the correct answer. It's about finding the truth, and your dad really cared about that. I think we're all asking, why does God let people have cancer? And can't we just ask God to stop cancer and like a miracle, it will just stop? I ask that question all the time. I guess my answer a few months ago and today hasn't really changed. It may not be a very good rabbi answer, but my answer is, I don't think God caused your dad to become sick. So I don't think God had the power to make the cancer go away either. When you're older, I might be able to use bigger words and ideas and explain it better. But I believe that just like us, God is sad right now and upset and heartbroken that your dad couldn't stay in the garden as long as he and all of us and even God wanted. If there was a part of God in each of us and God, then I think that God is crying with us today. Matt told me once that for him, God is quoting, a spiritual force at work in the world, not always visible, but present at the edges. For Matt, like in the story about the fox, God is that fence. God's the fence around the garden. God is what helps us tell the difference between the world as it is and the world as it was intended and still could be. Our job, Zoe and Olin, your job when you're older, at your bat and bar mitzvah, is to do what your mom and dad do every day. Make the garden heaven on earth. You both already do that now with your art and your music and your love for your family and your friends. That is a part of you that comes from your mom and your dad, and that will always be a part of you. Your dad will always be a part of you. Edward and Anna, we are so incredibly sorry for your sadness and your heartbreak. As parents, our only true prayer is that our children will outlive us, that they will inherit the garden, enjoy its fruits for as long as possible. And we are holding you. You're not expected to be the strong ones here, even though you have been throughout your lives. It's okay. Let us support you. Jocelyn and Conrad and Emily, Our siblings, by birth or by choice, are our confidants and truth tellers in life. Spouses too, but there is an honesty and a perspective that our siblings have that is like a mirror. We see ourselves reflected in them, for better or for worse, and it's a blessing. Matt's life was richer and deeper because he experienced it with you. And I know you feel exactly the same way. And for that matter, for how short the time was. But still, abundant gratitude and appreciation for the time you had. He's been gone only a few days, and already the garden seems so empty without him. Claire, I know that everywhere you look, you find and will find evidence of his time here. His love, his thoughtfulness, his planning and care, every single act is a love letter to you. Matt recorded videos. He left binders full of tabs and color-coded and notes and instructions for everything that he could think of. If the old proverb is that one should set their house in order, Matt treated that instruction like he had prepared your house on Salt Spring for friends and guests. The man was dangerous, was the label maker, and he wasn't afraid to use it. He was more prepared for this moment than we are, but he is helping us even now. There's a line in our siddur. It's a poem. We'll probably read it at the cemetery. Love doesn't die. People do. Matt's love for you and yours for him is eternal. And of course, you know that. But if you ever wonder, you'll find a letter or a video or pull down a binder from the shelf, and it will be right there holding you, like you held each other all of the time. There are a lot of people here today. The normal sequence of life events has been horribly interrupted, cut short. The fruits of the garden, they're still lush and ripe, but they don't taste as sweet right now. They are bitter with sadness. I will tell you that they will be sweet again, but if there is a lesson in this moment for all of us, particularly for those like myself who are Matt's age and have partners and children as he does. Okay, I'm a little bit older than Matt, but other than his crazy eclectic selection of music, we probably listen to the same bands. The lesson is as obvious as it is intimidating and scary, and something too many of us in this room are in denial about. All that we have is today. No one stays in the garden forever. Tomorrow is no guarantee. Early 20th century American author Alice Morse Earle said it poetically. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Matt lived each day of his 37 years with appreciation for Claire, for his children, his parents, his siblings, family, friends, this community. To the very last moments we shared in the hospital as he laid beneath that chuppah with you, Claire, and everyone holding it up, he was grateful for the gift of being in the garden with all of you. And so we, who are left here in the garden with these precious gifts that he has entrusted to us, with his cherished memory, with the lessons about life and friendship and justice and truth, joy and laughter, eclectic music tastes, and his curious affinity for Balkan dancing, Danish hip-hop, and an encyclopedic knowledge of cars. He has left us that and so much more. Would it be that we could all stay in the garden forever? That we would never have to leave? That there was no hole in the fence after we entered? But we know that that is not the way of the world. We cherish those years that we were truly blessed to have with Matt, though they were far too few. They were a gift because we shared them with him. May Matt's spirit live on as a precious memory and an influence in the hearts of all who were privileged to know him. We, remaining here in the garden, we will miss him, but we will tend it and nurture it just as he did. We will plant for his children so that it will be filled with sweetness and life and love. May his memory be a blessing as his life was a blessing to each of us. Amen. We'll take a moment for our own silent prayers, for our own chesed, for our own eulogies of this incredible man, to draw lessons from his life, to speak the words inside ourselves that are written on our hearts. It is Jewish custom to turn to the Psalms to find words of comfort and consolation in those ancient words attributed to King David. We'll read the one in your program in a moment, but I want to share another verse that's not in your program. In Psalm 15, God asked the question, or David asked the question of God, Adonai mi agur b'rochalecha mi yishkan b'har kodshecha. God, who at the end of their life merits the reward of living on in heaven. And now listen to the answer and think of Matt. Who merits such a reward? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may, do not retract it, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken, shall live in God's holy mountain. I want to invite Matt's friend Peter to come up and share a few words of memory and reflection.
I'm here speaking on behalf of Matt's Clark family, and I'm with Nick Isaac because while I was preparing these notes, I could hear Matt advising me to tell you that I'm almost certainly not going to make it through this without falling apart. And he'd slap me on the back and he would smile and he would say, because he's been telling me for many, many years that I'm actually a piss poor public speaker. But no one would fault me as a result for essentially being glued to my script. He'd say, just get on with it. And he'd say, but just in case, maybe have Nick, who's actually quite an exceptional public speaker, with you. I met Matt for the first time in the lobby of 800 Smythe on the first day of our clerkship. He and I saw each other over the tops of everyone else's heads and ended up next to each other. I had a chip on my shoulder and a healthy dose of youthful arrogance, and so naturally I started sizing him up. I quickly realized my mistake. I wasn't prepared for Matt. No one was. While I expected to meet a bunch of smart and interesting people, the clerk program should have warned the whole lot of us that people like Matt exist. Big body, giant brain, he was thoughtful, he was caring, he was precise. He not only excelled at the law, but spoke French better than I speak English, and would still take a week out of each summer to go to the Balkan dance camp. Actually, now that I remember, let me just get rid of my label maker joke. What made Matt even more insufferable was the fact that he had the self-awareness to know that he had won the genetic and family lotteries. That lovely brain was a gift from remarkable parents, and it was nurtured in a wonderful household with loving siblings. As Eileen Patel notes, he didn't take either for granted and wanted to do both those gifts justice. He wanted to do good with all of his good. Talking to him, I was overwhelmed with awe and jealousy. And as someone who makes his living arguing, I have to admit that I'm not at all proud to tell you about what happened next in our conversation. With my ego in shambles, I was desperate for something that I could hold over him, some fact or characteristic that I could seek refuge behind. What was the best I could come up with, having been at University of Toronto and clerking for the Chief Justice? I straightened my posture, eyed him, and asked, "How tall are you?" He told me. I looked at him with an embarrassingly childish smirk and said, "So I have you beat by half an inch. Checkmate, you Balkan dancing boy genius." Almost. Matt's response was classic Matt. He looked at me and he said, "Pete," in a way very few people call me. He said, "I'm not so sure. You are clearly a malnourished beanpole. I am clearly not. That makes you the equivalent of dress shirts, elongating vertical stripes, me the equivalent of horizontal. I think it may well be an optical illusion." At that moment, I didn't know if I wanted to give him a hug and ask him if he would be my best friend, or if I just wanted to punch him in his eloquent, overachieving mouth. The truth is, I have happily wanted to do both those things every day for the past 12 years, as I watched in awe as he only got gooder and gooder. This is where Matt would roll his eyes and give me a B- for the wordplay. While many people, myself included, began to increasingly take on the appearance and personality of a glitchy legal robot, Matt stubbornly insisted on protecting the smells, tastes, colors, and textures of life. As Jen Kelly says, Matt was an old soul in a young man's body, and that meant he understood time was finite, and that you had to embrace the grit of life, both the good and the bad. Don't drink bad wine and hug the people you love. The result was a good friend. Matt Brechtel recalls that Matt is the reason that our clerk group became a clerk family. After one fairly drunken outing at the Main, we were all standing outside and Matt proposed a group hug to everyone who had only known each other a matter of days, saying, "Come on, you pretentious people, get in here." Matt also made sure that our newly formed clerk family welcomed in significant others. When Matt Brechtel and Jen Kelly went to New York after Jen got her PhD, Matt had not only given the other Matt, both one tea, which I've never gotten. While he gave Matt a restaurant recommendation, he didn't tell them that he had sent a bottle of champagne to their table with a note that said, "Congratulations, Dr. Kelly." In a kind of serendipitous magic that seemed to follow Matt around, he could not have known that that was the same night that those two would get engaged. Nick Isaac's wife, Catalina, who, Nick will readily admit, is far too good for him, and who is Colombian, tells of how Matt, on first meeting her, wanted to know more about where she came from, and in an attempt to welcome her into the group, spent the next weeks basically becoming an expert on Colombian pop music by devouring Colombian radio stations. Matt was a good strategist. When all the clerks were broke and wanted to get away just for a brief respite, we all went to Whistler and we wanted to have a good meal. Couldn't afford it really though, and so wanting to facilitate our good time, Matt did some research and discovered that the corkage fee was per cork. And so we walked into the restaurant with a single magnum-sized bottle of wine. Matt, unlike most big men, could dance. He could sing, and he was good with languages. Nick, this guy, notes that Matt could go from singing Balkan music to singing Katy Perry, and that if he'd had just enough bourbon and he combined it with Balkan dancing, he became unreasonably confident that he was able to speak Italian fluently. To this day, we've all had to assume it was true. Matt was also a good father and husband. When Zoe was just a week old, Jen Kelly and Matt Brechtel brought their then 1-month-old Elliot over to meet Zoe for the first time. I just saw Jen crying and it's killing me. Elliot's blanket was left in Zoe's crib. Matt, the next day, had it couriered back to Matt Brechtel's office with a note that said, "Your son left this blanket in my daughter's bed. Don't ever let it happen again." Matt was even remarkable at being ill. In a process that is unfailingly ugly, he was tough and graceful. He talked of the blessing of not having to work because it meant morning snuggles and chats with Olin and Zoe. And even though he didn't have to work, he stayed curious and kept reading the law. Even late into March, he sent one of our friends, Joel Payne, a text with a screenshot from a recent judgment in which the judge had criticized a lay litigant for arguing that the reason that he couldn't work was because he had spent most of the past few months watching all 22 seasons of the American television show Law and Order in order to prepare for being a self-represented litigant. Matt's only comment was, and Zoe and Olin earmuffs, "Effing legendary." And of course, the special things that Matt could do with a ballpoint pen in his hand. He crafted factums, certification motions, and journal articles with confidence and focus and clarity. He was always so sure of himself with a pen in his hand, except once. He told me he had met this fascinating, smart, beautiful force of nature, and he was intrigued. He wanted to ask her out, but was uncharacteristically vulnerable and worried she might say no. Matt thought Claire might be too good for good. Matt summoned up the courage, and notwithstanding we were in the age of dating apps and smartphones, he grabbed a piece of paper and a ballpoint pen, and he wrote her a note which he placed in an envelope and had delivered by a human being. I think Matt would tell you it was the most important thing he ever wrote because it led to a marriage he was grateful for, to a woman he adored and was fiercely proud of, and it led to Zozo and Olin. He loved being your father and was very excited about all the remarkable things that you will no doubt do with a ballpoint pen in your own hands. Finally, in one of those incidents that you can't make up and wouldn't believe if it didn't involve Matt, he asked me to help him with an appeal after he got sick. I was acting for the respondent. After appellant's counsel had finished, the presiding judge looked at me and invited me to start my submissions by saying, "Mr. Good?" I almost started to tear up, but then I thought of the first day of our clerkship and I smiled. And then I did what I've been grateful to be able to do for the last 12 years when someone saw a giant lawyer and thought they were getting my dear friend Matt Good, but ended up stuck with me. I apologized. And I said, "Justice, different law clerk. I'm the slightly taller one." All of Matt's brothers and sisters in the law are grateful to have known Matt. We will miss him greatly. Claire, you have long known that you are an integral part of our quirky little legal family. But Zozo and Olin, we hope you know that there is an army of aunts and uncles in the law available at any time to roll you up in mattresses like human tacos, hang upside down with you on monkey bars, and to sit down and talk with you about how truly wonderful your father was. Thank you.
Conrad. Conrad brought a binder as well. You have a binder also?
Yeah. Thanks. Feel free to adjust the mic if it needs it. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Thank you for accepting Matt into this community and being so supportive now in this really difficult time. I'm going to do my best to get through this, so I'd appreciate your encouragement. If you find something funny, please laugh. Matt loved laughter and had a quick wit. There's so much to say about Matt, and my hope is that each of you continues to share your memories through this week and on into the future. This has been a maximally challenging year, with starting to be worried about Matt in the first half of last year, and then getting the terrifying news of his diagnosis in the summer, and walking with Matt through his illness and dying. Thanks. Matt, we love you so much. You are a beautiful man, and we are so grateful to know you and to have had you as long as we did. Please forgive me if my mix of present and past tense seems incorrect. This is a new adjustment which I'm not pleased about having to make. But also, as Rabbi Dan said at Matt and Claire's wedding ceremony the week of his passing, that this moment is forever. Although time goes on inevitably and the form of things change, Matt, you are with each one of us forever. You are certainly imprinted on my heart forever. Matt and Claire offered me a speech once before at their first wedding, which I didn't prepare for, and I was embarrassingly brief. I was then followed by a friend of Claire's who I think had been a speechwriter. So therefore, Matt has taught me this year that time and opportunity can be so fleeting, and so I'm here to speak of my experience of Matt. I think each of us has a different version of Matt that we love and which drew us to him. I met Matt very early on. Our parents, Anna and Ned, introduced us, and for that, I'm so grateful. When he came to the hospital to meet me, he brought me my treasured stuffed animal friend, Sasha, and that was the first of a lifetime of gifts and generosity shown to me. When things got really hard this year, Matt started using his blankie again. I was inspired to start cuddling my stuffed animal again, too. Every memory I possess, every moment of my life, Matt has been so deeply rooted in my way of being in the world. He stands so tall in my mind, this big, beautiful giant. Out of this lifetime of memories, I'd like to share a few. To those who remember them differently, I'm sorry, I look forward to hearing your versions. One of my earliest memories of Matt was being in the front hall of 1984 with Matt and Ellie Mout, building a Playmobil castle tower. This was the beginning of countless hours of Playmobil setups in the basement. Matt loved to create worlds and then organize them. A single setup could last a month or more, and when we finally had to tidy it up, he was just as excited to put the pieces away in the correct places. When Jocelyn joined us, our quartet became a quintet. Pretty soon, we'd all pile into the Eurovan and head north to the Yukon or east to Kingston. From these trips, we learned love of family. We witnessed our parents' deep love for friends we were not related to, like Rosenthal and the Sidinskis. We had big Madison parties in the backyard at 1984. Matt loved these good times, and Salt Spring became a place dedicated to that kind of celebration and togetherness. Matt was incredibly efficient and effective. I loved reading books as a kid. When I finished one, I'd look up and Matt had finished 3 or 4. When I was applying to music schools, Matt practically wrote my applications for me. All I had to do was sign and learn to play. Matt was doing summer studies at the Sorbonne. His love of cooking led him to buy some fine and very large cooking knives. His next best idea was to casually carry them with him into the courthouse to watch a French proceeding. He managed to talk his way out of the challenge by security personnel in exquisite Parisian French and left the bag at the front desk for pickup later. When Matt met Claire, he knew he had met his match, not only someone that could keep up with him, but someone who could push him forward. With their first wedding, they began weaving their lives together. One of the times I've seen Matt happiest was when he came down the stairs at Walnut, cradling a tiny Zoe in the crook of one long arm, beaming at us all with pride. He was a leader for us and showed us how to be a great father. I saw that same quiet love and pride when Olin was born, and I distinctly remember going to meet Olin at the hospital with Desi when he was only a few days old. I'm grateful that Joss and I were able to share being parents with him. He became good buds with Clover this past year and called him his little ray of sunshine. Matt had an incredibly tender heart, and it was expressed in his love for all the little ones in his life. Matt's communication style was direct, and he was not always gentle in his opinions, but you had to accept that they were genuine. He could shut you down just like that, especially when you're on a roll, and then pick you back up. His generosity always outweighed those blunt comments. He wouldn't always tell you how much he cared for you, but he would show it in his actions. His giving was never conditional and never felt like it was a duty or an obligation. It was so natural for him. I've heard it over and over again from many sources that Matt was an exceptional lawyer. He came from lawyer stock, but never rode any coattails. He forged his own path. Matt could learn the ins and outs of a system and then play around in it how he wanted. He could process an incredible amount of information without losing track of any of it. Matt was also dedicated to beauty. He loved bright, colorful clothing, loved eating lots of good food, and had an eclectic taste in obscure music. I feel so grateful that we can walk through 1812 and be surrounded by the art and style that he loved. Matt was able to accept his diagnosis and immediately move forward with his new reality. He was able to both hold hope for more time, alongside a practical realism of what was coming and what he felt he had to do with the time he had. He thought, what can I do to make things better for others, to make things easier for Claire, Zoe, and Olin when I'm gone? Matt spent many hours planning and organizing so life would be more manageable for Claire after he died. Zoe and Olin, this is a room full of people that are all here because they love your dad. They love you too. And I want to tell you that we are here for you. We are here to hug you and listen to you and to support you in who you are right now and who you will become. When you miss your dad, tell us. We will miss him together and share together, and we will pull his memory close to us and wrap up in it like a big cozy blanket. Joss, thank you for all your hard work this year. You didn't hesitate when you were needed. You were just there. Being with Matt and Claire and Zoe and Olin, hearing Matt when he needed to say difficult things, holding space for him and his process. I think the time you spent together brought you closer together and certainly made these last months of his life brighter. You bring your good-natured spirit, as well as your ability to brush off those things which don't really matter in the end. Thank you for helping Em and I through our struggles. We are so grateful that you are close now, and we can thank Matt for that as well. Iggy and Grana, thank you for bringing Matt into this world. You surrounded Matt with your love from the first moment. Thank you for the family that you birthed and nurtured for us, and for all the incredible adventures we had together. And thank you for being with Matt right until the end. Claire, thank you so much for everything you've done for my brother. I wanted so much that you two would have more time together. I know that no one else could have fulfilled him like you did. Matt was a dreamer who loved making his dreams come alive, and his dreams couldn't have come true without you. This past week has been the hardest of my life, but I've been so inspired by you and so impressed. All through this experience, you've exhibited those qualities that Matt loved about you and drew him to you. Your love has been steadfast through the worst times. We commit to supporting you in your grief and also in your living and going on. You are my sister, and I'm so grateful to have you. Matt loved the rain. It was cozy and comforting. Recently, he began making recordings of the rain, and particularly good storms. Joss played them for him during their visit in the hospital. Now, in the past few days, the sun has started to come out again, and Matt really is gone. Matt, we love you so much. You are a beautiful man, and we are so grateful to know you and to have had you as long as we did. Thank you.
Rabbi Dan said I wasn't expected to speak, but Matt asked me to, so I want to honor that request and speak for a few minutes about my memories of Matt as a husband and a father. Matt and I met at a party in 2011. He had recently returned home to Vancouver from a clerkship in Ottawa, and I had recently come home from a few years practicing in New York. It was a lawyer party, but I was there with my friend Leah, not a lawyer, and it really was Leah who spent time talking to Matt. Apparently, they talked about Matt's interest in dance, musical theater, and interior design. As we left the party, and there's an anticipated laugh because we told this story at our wedding, Leah commented, "That guy Matt is a really nice guy. Too bad he's gay." So imagine my surprise a few days later when he asked me out, and as Pete said, not by email or text, it was a handwritten invitation to the ballet, sent by courier to my office. And from that first date, Matt was a wonderful partner. He was a great cook, had a generous spirit, and a quick wit. We shared a passion for the practice of law and for the pursuit of justice. From the time I first knew him, Matt had a clear vision for his practice and the impact he hoped to have. He was proud to be a third-generation lawyer and was a true believer in the power of class actions to promote access to justice. He considered himself an ally to women in the profession, and as our relationship progressed, he was a great supporter of and took pride in my career. On the topic of Matt as a lawyer, so many people who knew Matt professionally have written to me in the 3 short days since his passing, and I see many of his colleagues here today. It is clear that Matt left a mark in his professional life. One of Matt's colleagues wrote to me when he learned of his passing, "Matt was amazing in all kinds of ways. An incredible mind and focus, yes, but for me it was more his joy, humor, and creativity that stood out. He was unique in all of the right ways." A judge who Matt appeared in front of wrote, "He had so much passion for his area, well tempered with substance and a sense of humor." One of Matt's law school professors wrote, "Matt was a legal giant who made incredible impacts during his all too short time here with us." On maybe our second or third date, Matt said, rather ominously, that he had something to tell me. It turned out his great confession was that he was younger than I was, which I knew, and by more than a couple of years, which I did not. He assured me that he was very mature, he knew what he wanted, and he wasn't afraid to date someone older than he was, and if the person was right, to settle down and have children with them, and soon. That confidence, knowing what he wanted and not wasting any time pursuing it, was characteristic of Matt in all aspects of his life in the time I knew him. As Matt's sister Jocelyn commented after his diagnosis, and Matt really liked this way of putting it, it was as if Matt had lived his life on fast forward. One thing that Matt wasn't necessarily that focused on, at least initially, was marriage. Matt moved in with me after we'd been dating for about a year, and we started talking about the future, but not necessarily about getting married. In the context of that unwed domesticity, I made a comment about not being able to make some recipe because I didn't have a stand mixer. And I went on to explain a stand mixer is the kind of thing one would only have because somebody had received it as a wedding gift. A couple of days later, Matt came home and announced he had a gift for me. He presented me with a stand mixer. My reaction, does this mean we're never getting married? And based on Matt's response, something to the effect of, we can get married if you want, I never knew for sure whether he had intended the stand mixer as a form of proposal or whether my reaction was the actual impetus for our marriage. Whatever ambivalence Matt had for marriage, there was no question he wanted to be a dad. Zoe and Olin, the days that you were born were the happiest days of your dad's life, and getting to know and spend time with both of you were his greatest joys. Zoe, your dad loved that you were such a brave kid who never gives up. You are so friendly and kind, and you make sure everyone feels included. Dad loved to swim with you, and he loved it when you delivered the pizzas that he made on Salt Spring. He was so happy that you're singing in the same choir that he sang in when he was a kid. Olin, Your dad loved playing Lego and Playmobil with you, and he loved reading books together with you. You were so funny, and Dad loved joking around with you. He was so excited that you're learning piano and drums, and that you're the only boy in your ballet class, just like he was. Zoe and Olin, Dad loved that you guys are a team and that you look out for each other. He was so proud of both of you. As Rabbi Dan said when Matt was diagnosed with cancer 9 months ago, he decided that same day to step away from practice and to focus on family. He spent his limited energy organizing photo archives, recording hours of video and audio, writing letters and buying gifts for milestone events for Zoe and Olin. And I hope that those of you who knew different facets of Matt will write letters to Zoe and Olin about their dad that they can read as they get older. Together with his legacy work for the kids, and you've heard a little bit about this already, Matt set out on a mission to train me in the aspects of household management that he'd been handling. He made appointments at the bank to give me signing authority on his accounts. He showed me how to log into the website for registering for community center programs. When something needed to be repaired, he gave me the information about who to call, but then left it to me to handle in a relinquishment of control that he must have found very challenging. Anyone who's been to our house on Salt Spring has seen the labels that identify the contents of every drawer will know that Matt was extremely organized. And anyone who's seen the surface of my desk will know that I have, let's call it, different strengths. As Matt knew that he had limited time, he tried to organize our personal lives into binders, birth certificates and passports into a key docs binder, taxes, utilities, and banking into a thicker life admin binder. There are Google Docs cross-referenced to the binders, which give instructions on financial matters, explain household things like the garbage and recycling pickup schedule, and offer opinions on topics ranging from schooling for our children to whether my current car is appropriate in light of Matt's assessment that, despite some improvement, I remain a, quote, marginal driver. Despite the knock on my driving, in a circumstance that permits no opportunity for rejoinder, the object of these materials is expressed in the cover letter, which begins, "I know you don't really want to see or use this document, but it is meant to make things easier for you." Matt's focus over these past 9 months has been that, to make things easier for me and to provide a legacy for our kids. It won't be easy. We know this, and he knew it. But Matt also knew the incredible amount of support we would receive from our wonderful community, our family, our neighbors, our colleagues, the Temple Sholom community, from friends near and far, the people in this room and beyond. He knew it because we received that support throughout the time he was ill, and he knew that support would continue following his death, that our community would wrap its arms around us and we would not be alone in our grief. Far from it. I think that knowledge gave him great comfort as he faced his final days, as it does to us now. One of the last things that Matt said to me in the hospital, as I was explaining the logistics of Zoe and Olin's extracurriculars for that day, was, "Life just keeps going on." And of course it does, and it will for us, albeit with a hole in our family. Thank you, Matt, for doing what you could to allow us to see that we can carry on. We love you and we'll miss you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenachaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, Shivtecha umishantecha, Hema yenachamuni, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, neged sorerai. Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed, Yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, Veshavti beveit Adonai, Veshavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim. We read together in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It is a great blessing to be a rabbi of this community, and in particular to have been Matt's rabbi and Claire and Zoe and Olin's rabbi. I got to know Matt well about 4 years ago when he and Claire were part of our JIC class studying for a year that led to his decision to become Jewish. Matt was a terrific student, curious, reflective, honest, and joyful. On all of those attributes we heard about him today, they came together, and through him, he blessed our community as a remarkable human being. One of the great privileges of becoming Jewish as an adult is the opportunity to choose your own Hebrew name. It is the name by which you are called in sacred moments. And Matt chose for himself the name Meir, which means one who shines or one who enlightens. In remarking on his choice, Matt reflected, hopefully that's not too self-aggrandizing. He said, there have been many worthy bearers of that name, and I will do my best to be another. Indeed, you were, Matt. In his life, Matt did shine brightly in the world, and his memory will continue to shine evermore with us. Today is one of those sacred times when we will use that name. I want to invite Rabbi Moskovitz to chant the words of the El Malei Rachamim as we ask God to embrace Matt's soul under the wings of a loving and sheltering presence.
Please rise. El Malei Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפיך שכינה, עם קרושים ותחורים, כזוכר כי מזכירים, את נשמת מאיר בן אברהם ושרה, שחלל עולמו, בעל הרחמים, יסתירכו, ברשת כנפיו עולמי, ויצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Meir ben Avraham Vasar, our beloved Matthew Good, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. A few brief instructions before we leave from this sacred place. We will go in procession, those that would like to join us at Temple Sholom Cemetery, directly from here to the cemetery for the internment. It's about a 40-minute drive. Those that do not want to make the drive, we will be streaming the internment ceremony, so you can watch that on the temple website in about 45 minutes or so. I'm going to ask you at that time when you do go to go directly to your cars, not to greet the family and not even to greet each other, as we want to get the family back to their home as quickly as we can, and we don't want to be delayed here. When you arrive at the cemetery, unless you are mobility challenged such that you can't walk down the long driveway that there is and the hill into the cemetery, I'll ask you please to park on the street outside the cemetery gates. A reminder that there is a Shiva Minyan on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday private to the family at their home, but Thursday here at 5 o'clock open to the public. There are instructions on the email that was sent out about where the family would like to receive or would like to dedicate gifts in Matt's memory. At this time, if I could ask the pallbearers to please join us here beside the casket. The family will follow out behind, and then we'll follow behind them. Please rise.
Carry you.
Tzurim. Umkreneto lishane afar, micha mocha ba'al gevurot umido melach, melech b'mitu mechayim atzmiach Yeshua. Mechalkel chayim b'chesed. Shay, you can cut my mic, please.